Welcome back to Rhythm Reading Bootcamp Season 1. This is episode 3, where we are going to talk about basic note values. Now, if you're yet to go and pick up a copy of the Rhythm Reading Bootcamp books, hit the link in the video description, head straight to the free bass transcriptions website, grab yourself a copy. It covers everything that we look at in these videos in a lot more detail and with plenty of exercises to practice with. So book 1 of the Rhythm Reading Bootcamp series deals with some basic fundamental rhythmic note values. We're going to cover each one of these in depth as we go through the series, but I'm just going to give you a broad overview to start with. I'm going to be using the American system of rhythmic notation, so basically dealing with fractions, whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, etc., rather than the European classical system of semibreves and minims and crotchets, which I was brought up on because from experience it makes a lot more sense talking to people about half and quarter notes than it does about semibreves, particularly when you're dealing with a potentially global audience. So as far as the basic note values go, here's what we're going to be dealing with. Whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, and eighth notes. Now, of course, that's not the whole story. We also have dotted half notes and dotted quarter notes. Dotted notes are going to be covered in a lot more depth in episode 5 of this series. They're also in chapter 5 of Rhythm Reading Bootcamp book, Vol.1. Let's take a look at whole notes. So our most basic note value, the longest one that we deal with on an everyday basis, is the whole note, which lasts for 4 beats or a whole bar of 4/4 time, hence its name. We're going to start off with a pretty basic whole note exercise. This just involves 2 pitches, A and D. Obviously you can play them both as open strings, or you can fret them. I'm going to be using the 5th fret of the E string for A, and I'm going to be using the 5th fret of the A string for D. You can play them wherever you're most comfortable with. The great thing about the bass is you always have options as to where to play pitches. So if we take a look at this exercise, all I'm going to do is count the beats out loud and make sure that my whole notes ring for their maximum written value. I'm not going to put in any rests, any breaks in the sound, unless there's one written in the music. And in this case, it's just long notes, just whole notes. So here we go. I'm going to count myself in. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Absurdly easy, right? But we're getting our fundamentals together and things are going to get trickier pretty soon, don't worry. When you're playing, it's really important to make sure that each note lasts for its full written value and isn't cut off prematurely. Whole notes are pretty straightforward, so let's move on to half notes. If we take our whole note and split it into 2 equal parts, we get half notes, which are worth 2 beats each. Now, these look kind of like whole notes, but they have a tail attached. And you'll notice as we go through this that the more visually complex the note looks, the shorter its time value is. Since each half note is only worth 2 beats, we're going to need 2 of them per bar if we're working in 4/4 time, which we happen to be. We're going to have a note on beat 1, that's going to last for all of beat 1 and all of beat 2, and then on beat 3, we're going to need another one to fill up the space of beat 3 and beat 4. So let's take a look at this exercise. Again, we're just using A's and D's, nice and simple. We're going to use a click. I'm going to count us in. Long notes all the time. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, pretty straightforward, but important to lock in those fundamental skills. You'll notice that in that exercise, some of the note tails point upwards, while others point downwards. And here's what that means, and here's how we decide it. It's really a device to make the music look tidier. If the pitch of the note is below the middle line of the staff, then the tail is going to point upwards to keep that tail inside the staff. If it falls above the middle line, then it points downwards again to just keep things neat and tidy. Notes on the middle line, so a D on the bass clef, can really point in either direction, and this is sort of determined by the context of what's happening around it, and it will go with whatever the most common choices in that bar. The general idea is to try and keep things looking as neat and tidy as possible to make life easier for whoever's reading the music. And it's important to remember that the note value remains the same regardless of which direction the tail is pointing. Doesn't matter if it's up or down, it's still a half note. So if we take our half note now and divide it in half again, we're going to get quarter notes. And this is the basic unit of pulse for most music that we encounter, which is in 4/4 time. If you listen to pretty much any song that you hear and tap your foot along with the beat, with the pulse, you'll be feeling that it fits into a repeating cycle of 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And by tapping your foot along, you are marking out the quarter note pulse. So if we have bars full of quarter notes, it just means that we're playing on every beat. And again, this seems really simple, but it's amazing how many people struggle to play a continuous stream of notes with no gaps between them, especially when you're trying to count along. So let's try that. Again, really simple on the pitch front, just A's and D's, but our focus here is long notes, no gaps in the sound, and being able to count and feel where we are in the bar all the time. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've talked about whole notes, half notes, and quarter notes. We're going to combine them now into one exercise to practice counting those basic time values. So just give yourself a few seconds to look through this and make sure you're happy with counting that time before we start playing it. So maybe just have a look at the notation, pause the video for a second. When you're happy with it, hit play and we'll play through it. 1, 2, 3, 4. As well as dealing with notation symbols that deal with the amount of time that a note lasts for, we need to get comfortable and confident with symbols for rests, which designate how much silence we might have in a piece of music. And of course, the important thing about rhythm is that balance of sound and silence. So we need to get really good at recognizing what these symbols mean. We're going to start off with the whole note rest. So a whole note rest appears as a small rectangle shape which hangs down from the 4th line up on the stave. A half note rest uses the same symbol, but the difference is this little rectangle sits on the middle line. The line for D sits on top of that line. And again, as you might expect, we get 2 of those in a bar. Quarter note rests always remind me of a lightning bolt, and I'm really glad that notation software exists because I find these pretty much impossible to draw, but they look like this. So that's what our basic rest values look like. Let's put them into practice through reading. I'm going to be using my left hand to stop any of the notes because my right hand has more than enough work to do just starting the note off. So I'm just going to, whenever I see a rest, I'm just going to gently release my left hand pressure to stop the note, like so. That's all we need to do. If you're playing an open string, you might have to deal with it slightly differently, but you'll figure that out. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So in this episode, we've hopefully got pretty confident and accurate counting whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, and their equivalent rests. In the next episode, we're going to take a deep dive into the wonderful world of eighth notes. See you there.